I saw you. I know what you did. The woman said it clearly, loud enough for half the first-class cabin to hear. She was pointing at Valencia Reed, who stood in the galley organizing meal trays with the same careful precision she brought to everything she did. Valencia looked up slowly, a water pitcher still in her hand. She said calmly. I'm sorry, I don't understand. The passenger, a white woman in her early 60s, expensively dressed, dripping in jewelry, stepped closer to the galley. My diamond bracelet, the woman said. It was on my tray table 15 minutes ago. I went to the restroom, and when I came back, it was gone. And you, she pointed again, her finger stabbing the air, you were the only one near my seat. Valencia set down the pitcher and folded her hands in front of her, a gesture she'd learned long ago to keep herself centered. I haven't touched anything on your tray table, Valencia said evenly, but I'd be happy to help you look for it. Sometimes items slip between the seats or... I don't need help looking, the woman interrupted. I need you to give it back. The cabin had gone quiet. Passengers were watching now, some with curiosity, some with discomfort, some already forming judgments based on nothing but the scene in front of them. Valencia felt the familiar weight settling on her shoulders. She'd been a flight attendant for 14 years, and she knew exactly what was happening. Valencia said, her voice still calm but firmer now. I understand you're upset, but I haven't taken your bracelet. If you'd like, I can ask the lead flight attendant to help us search the area around your seat. The woman's face flushed. I don't want to search. I want you to empty your pockets. Valencia didn't move. She just looked at the woman, really looked at her, and said quietly, I'm not going to do that. The woman's eyes widened. Excuse me. I haven't stolen anything, Valencia said, and I'm not going to be treated like a criminal based on an assumption. The woman's voice rose. I saw you near my seat. You had access, and now my bracelet is gone. What am I supposed to think? Valencia took a slow breath. She could feel the eyes on her. She could feel the weight of the moment. And she knew, from years of experience, from years of being the only black flight attendant on certain crews, from years of watching how quickly assumptions could harden into accusations, that what happened next would matter, not just for her, but for every person who'd ever been presumed guilty because of how they looked. So she stood there, calm and still, and said, I understand you're missing something valuable, but I didn't take it, and I'm going to ask you to please take your seat while we sort this out properly. The woman didn't move. I want to speak to the captain, she said. I'll get the lead flight attendant, Valencia replied. And as she turned to press the call button for the cockpit, she couldn't help but notice one small detail that no one else seemed to see. The woman's left wrist, the one she kept gesturing with, had a faint tan line, exactly where a bracelet would sit, a bracelet she'd been wearing recently. But not today. Valencia didn't say anything. Not yet, but she filed the detail away, because details mattered, and in her experience, the truth always lived in the details. Valencia Reed was 43 years old. She'd been flying for Delta Airlines for 14 years, but her career before that had been very different. She'd worked for 8 years as a fraud investigator for a major insurance company, tracking false claims, interviewing witnesses, building cases that required patience, precision, and an eye for inconsistency. She'd been good at it, very good, but the hours had been brutal, the work emotionally draining, and when her mother got sick, Valencia had needed something with more flexibility. So she'd become a flight attendant. It wasn't what people expected when they heard about her background. But Valencia had learned that expectations were just other people's limitations. She liked flying. She liked the rhythm of it, the chance to meet people, the satisfaction of turning a chaotic cabin into something calm and orderly. And she was good at reading people, at noticing what didn't fit, at seeing the story beneath the story. Which is why, as she watched the lead flight attendant, a white woman in her 50s named Diane, approached the passenger seat, Valencia was already putting pieces together. The tan line, the fact that the woman had gone to the restroom, the timing of the accusation. And one more thing. The woman's hands were shaking. Not with anger, with something else. Fear, maybe. Or guilt. Diane arrived at the galley with her professional smile firmly in place. Valencia, can you tell me what's happening? Valencia explained calmly the accusation, the demand to empty her pockets, her refusal. Diane's smile tightened. Okay, let me talk to the passenger. She walked to seat 3A, where the woman was sitting with her arms crossed, her expression set in righteous indignation. I'm Diane, the lead flight attendant. I understand there's been a misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding, the woman said. That flight attendant stole my bracelet. I'm sure that's not what happened, Diane said gently. But let's take a look around your seat. Sometimes things slip into unexpected places. The woman's jaw tightened. I already looked. I know, but sometimes a fresh set of eyes helps. Diane knelt down and began searching under the seat, in the seat pocket, between the cushions. Nothing. She stood up. I'm not finding anything. Are you sure you had it with you when you boarded? The woman's face flushed. Of course I'm sure. I always wear it when I fly. It's a family heirloom. And that woman, she pointed toward the galley, where Valencia stood watching, was the only one who came near my seat. Diane glanced back at Valencia, and for just a moment, Valencia saw the flicker of doubt in her eyes. Not certainty, just doubt, just a question. Could it be true? And Valencia knew, in that moment, that this wasn't going to end easily, because once doubt took root, it grew. Diane returned to the galley. Valencia, I need to ask, did you see anything unusual near 3A? Anyone else in the area? Just the usual service, Valencia said. I brought her a water about 20 minutes ago. That's the only time I was at her seat. And you didn't see a bracelet? No. Diane hesitated. Look, I believe you, but she's insisting, and she's threatening to file a formal complaint with the airline and possibly the police when we land. Valencia felt her stomach tighten. So what are you asking me to do? Diane looked uncomfortable. I'm asking if you'd be willing to, just to clear the air, let me check your pockets, just so we can tell her we did our due diligence. Valencia's jaw clenched. Diane, I didn't take her bracelet. I know. I believe you. But if we can just eliminate the possibility. I'm not emptying my pockets, Valencia said quietly. I didn't steal anything, and I'm not going to let myself be searched like a suspect. Diane sighed. Valencia, I'm trying to de-escalate this. By treating me like a thief. That's not what I'm doing. That's exactly what you're doing. They stood there for a moment, the tension thick between them. Finally, Diane said, Okay, I'll talk to the captain. She walked toward the cockpit. Valencia stood in the galley, her hands steady, her mind racing. She knew what was coming. She'd seen it before, not to her, but to others. The benefit of the doubt always seemed to flow in one direction, and she was standing on the wrong side of it. But Valencia had learned, over the years, that panic didn't solve problems. Preparation did. So she pulled out her phone, still in airplane mode, and opened the Notes app, and she started writing down everything. The time of the accusation, the woman's seat number, the tan line on her wrist, the fact that the woman had been to the restroom, the names of nearby passengers who might have seen something, every detail. Because if this was going to escalate, Valencia wanted her own record. 10 minutes later, the captain emerged from the cockpit. He was a white man in his late 50s, with graying hair and the calm, authoritative demeanor of someone who'd been flying for decades. His name was Captain Harris. He walked to 3A first, spoke quietly with a passenger, then came to the galley. Valencia, he said, his tone neutral. Can we talk in the back? Of course, Captain. They walked to the rear galley, away from passengers. Captain Harris looked at her, not unkindly, but seriously. Tell me what happened. Valencia told him, calmly, clearly, every detail. When she finished, Captain Harris nodded slowly. And you didn't see the bracelet? No, sir. And you didn't take it? Valencia met his eyes. No, sir, I didn't. He studied her for a moment. The passenger is very insistent. She's threatening legal action. She wants us to detain you when we land and have airport security search you. Valencia felt her heart rate spike, but she kept her voice steady. Captain, I understand she's upset, but I didn't take her bracelet, and I'm not going to consent to being searched based on an accusation with no evidence. Captain Harris sighed. I believe you, Valencia, but I also have to take passenger complaints seriously, especially when they involve allegations of theft. I understand that, Valencia said, but you also have a responsibility to your crew, and right now, you're treating me like I'm guilty. I'm not. You're considering having me detained and searched, Valencia interrupted gently. That's treating me like a suspect. Captain Harris was quiet for a moment. What do you suggest? He asked. Valencia had been thinking about this since the accusation started. Review the cabin footage, she said. Captain Harris frowned. We don't have cameras in the cabin. No, but there are cameras in the galley, and at the boarding door. If this woman's bracelet was stolen, there should be footage of whoever took it. And if it wasn't stolen, if it was lost or misplaced, the footage will show that too. Captain Harris considered this. The footage is stored on the aircraft system. We'd need to download it after we land. Then let's do that, Valencia said. Let the footage speak for itself. Captain Harris nodded slowly. All right, I'll inform the passenger that we'll be reviewing the security footage after landing. And I'll have airport security meet us at the gate, not to search you, but to facilitate the investigation. Valencia's stomach sank, but she nodded. Thank you, Captain. He started to walk away, then paused. Valencia, for what it's worth, I've flown with you a dozen times. You're one of the best flight attendants I've worked with. I don't believe you did this. Thank you, sir, Valencia said. But she noticed he'd said, I don't believe you did this. Not I know you didn't. And that small distinction told her everything she needed to know about how fragile trust could be. The rest of the flight was tense. Valencia continued her duties, serving drinks, collecting trash, helping passengers, but she could feel the weight of eyes on her. Some passengers looked at her with suspicion, others with sympathy. A few didn't look at her at all. The woman in 3A sat rigid in her seat, arms crossed, occasionally glancing toward the galley with an expression that seemed equal parts anger and something else. Anxiety, maybe. Valencia noticed. She noticed everything. The way the woman kept touching her wrist. The way she avoided eye contact with other passengers. The way she pulled out her phone twice, typed something, then put it away without sending. And Valencia kept adding to her notes. Because she knew, whatever happened when they landed, she'd need more than just her word. She'd need evidence. She'd need details. She'd need the truth. The plane landed in Atlanta at 4:47 p.m. As passengers began to deplane, Captain Harris made an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be experiencing a slight delay in deplaning due to an ongoing security matter. We appreciate your patience. Groans rippled through the cabin. Valencia stood in the galley, watching as two airport security officers boarded the plane. One was a black woman in her 40s, tall and composed. The other was a white man, younger, with a notebook in hand. Diane met them at the door, spoke quietly, then pointed toward the galley. The officers approached. Ms. Reed? The woman asked. Yes, Valencia said. I'm Officer Martinez. This is Officer Chen. We need to ask you a few questions about an allegation of theft. I understand, Valencia said. We'd like to do this off the aircraft, if that's all right. Valencia nodded. As she walked toward the exit, she could feel every passenger watching, some with pity, some with judgment, and the woman in 3A, still seated, still waiting, watched with an expression Valencia couldn't quite read. They took her to a small security office near the gate. Officer Martinez gestured to a chair. Please, have a seat. Valencia Saturday. Officer Chen pulled out his notebook. Can you tell us what happened? Valencia told him everything. Calmly, clearly, with every detail she documented. When she finished, Officer Martinez leaned back in her chair. And you're saying you didn't take the bracelet? I'm saying I didn't take it because I didn't, Valencia said. I never saw it. Officer Chen glanced at his notes. The passenger, Mrs. Whitmore, says she saw you near her seat around the time the bracelet went missing. I was near her seat because I was serving passengers, Valencia said. That's my job. She's asking that we search you, Officer Martinez said. Valencia felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her voice steady. I'm not consenting to a search. I haven't committed a crime, and I'm not going to be treated like a suspect based on an accusation with no evidence. Officer Chen frowned. You understand that refusing a search could be seen as... As what? Valencia interrupted. As an admission of guilt? No. Refusing a search is my right, and I'm exercising it. Officer Martinez studied her. Ms. Reed, we're just trying to resolve this. I understand that, Valencia said, and I want it resolved too, which is why I'm suggesting you review the aircraft security footage. There are cameras in the galley and at the boarding door. If I took something, it'll be on camera. If I didn't, that'll be on camera too. Officer Martinez and Officer Chen exchanged a glance. The footage would need to be downloaded from the aircraft system, Officer Chen said. That takes time. Then take the time, Valencia said. I'll wait. Officer Martinez nodded slowly. All right, we'll coordinate with Delta to pull the footage, but you'll need to stay here while we do. Am I being detained? Valencia asked. You're being asked to cooperate with an investigation, Officer Martinez said carefully. That's not an answer. Officer Martinez sighed. No, you're not under arrest, but we're asking you to stay while we review the evidence. Valencia nodded. Then I'll stay, but I'd like to call someone. Who? My union rep, Valencia said, and possibly a lawyer. Officer Chen raised an eyebrow. You think you need a lawyer? Valencia looked at him directly. I think I'm a black woman being accused of theft with no evidence. So yes, I think I need a lawyer. Officer Martinez's expression softened just slightly. That's your right. You can make your call. They left her alone in the office. Valencia pulled out her phone and dialed. The call went to Marcus Lin, her union representative, a man she'd worked with twice before on crew scheduling disputes. He answered on the second ring. Valencia, what's going on? She explained. When she finished, Marcus was silent for a long moment. Okay, he said finally. First, don't say anything else to security without me present. Second, I'm on my way. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Third, do you have any documentation of what happened? I wrote down everything, Valencia said. Times, names, details. Good. That's good. Send it to me now. Valencia forwarded her notes. And Valencia, Marcus said, Yeah. You did the right thing refusing the search. Don't let them pressure you into changing your mind. I won't, Valencia said. See you soon. He hung up. Valencia sat in the small office, alone with her thoughts. She wasn't scared. She'd been through worse. But she was tired. Tired of having to defend herself against assumptions. Tired of being presumed guilty until proven innocent. Tired of carrying the weight of other people's biases. But she also knew something they didn't. She knew she was innocent. And she knew the footage would prove it. All she had to do was wait. Marcus arrived 23 minutes later, slightly out of breath, carrying a briefcase and a tablet. Officer Martinez led him into the office. Ms. Reed, this is your representative. Yes, Valencia said. Marcus Lin, Association of Flight Attendants. Marcus shook Officer Martinez's hand, then sat down next to Valencia. Have they reviewed the footage yet? He asked. We're waiting on Delta to download it from the aircraft system, Officer Martinez said. It should be ready in the next 30 minutes. Marcus nodded. And until then... Ms. Reed is free to go, Officer Martinez said. But we'd like her to stay in case we have follow-up questions. She'll stay, Marcus said. But I want it on record that she's cooperating voluntarily and that she's not being detained or charged with anything. Understood, Officer Martinez said. She left the room. Marcus turned to Valencia. You okay? I'm fine, Valencia said. You did everything right, Marcus said. And once they see that footage, this whole thing is going to fall apart. Valencia nodded, but something was nagging at her. Something about the woman's behavior. The tan line, the nervousness, The timing. And then it clicked. Marcus, Valencia said slowly. What if the bracelet was never on the plane? Marcus frowned. What do you mean? What if she never brought it? What if she's claiming it was stolen to cover up the fact that she lost it somewhere else, or sold it, or had it stolen before she even boarded? Marcus sat back. That's a hell of a theory. It explains the tan line, Valencia said. She's been wearing that bracelet regularly. But not today. Why? Because she didn't have it. But she needs to explain why it's missing, to her insurance company, maybe, or to her family. So she creates a story. She accuses someone, and she picks the person least likely to be believed. Marcus was quiet for a moment. If you're right, he said, the footage won't just clear you. It'll expose her. Exactly, Valencia said. But we need to be careful, Marcus warned. If you're wrong, it'll look like you're trying to deflect blame. I'm not wrong, Valencia said. And she wasn't, because she'd spent 8 years as a fraud investigator. And she knew a false claim when she saw one. 40 minutes later, Officer Martinez returned. The footage is ready, she said. We've set up a viewing room. Ms. Reed, Mr. Lin, you're welcome to join us. They followed her down a hallway to a small room with a monitor and several chairs. Officer Chen was already there, along with a Delta security supervisor, a black man in his 50s named Gerald. Ms. Reed, Gerald said, nodding. I'm sorry you're going through this. Thank you, Valencia said. Gerald pulled up the footage on the monitor. This is from the forward galley camera, he said. It captures the area from rows 1 through 5. He pressed play. The footage showed Valencia working, serving drinks, collecting trash, helping passengers. At timestamp 2:34 p.m., Valencia approached row 3 with a water bottle. She handed it to Mrs. Whitmore, who was reading a magazine. Valencia gestured to the tray table, asking if Mrs. Whitmore needed anything else. Mrs. Whitmore shook her head. Valencia moved on. No bracelet was visible on the tray table. Mrs. Whitmore's wrist was not visible in the shot. Officer Martinez leaned forward. Can you zoom in on the tray table? Gerald did. Still no bracelet. They watched as Mrs. Whitmore stood up about 10 minutes later and walked toward the restroom, leaving her seat empty. The camera angle didn't show her wrist clearly, but as she walked past the galley, Valencia was visible in the background, organizing supplies, her back to the cabin. Mrs. Whitmore returned from the restroom 5 minutes later. She sat down, looked at her tray table, then stood up quickly and looked around. That's when she approached the galley and the accusation began. Officer Chen paused the footage. So the bracelet wasn't on the tray table when the flight attendant served water, he said slowly. And the flight attendant wasn't near the seat when the passenger went to the restroom. Correct? Gerald said. Officer Martinez looked at Valencia. Ms. Reed, did you go near row 3 at any other time? Only during initial boarding, Valencia said. I helped Mrs. Whitmore with her carry-on, but I didn't see a bracelet then either. Gerald pulled up the boarding footage. It showed Mrs. Whitmore boarding, placing her bag in the overhead bin, and sitting down. Valencia approached, helped adjust the bag, and walked away. Mrs. Whitmore's wrists were visible. No bracelet. Officer Chen sat back. So she boarded without the bracelet. It would appear so, Gerald said. Marcus crossed his arms, which means Ms. Reed couldn't possibly have stolen it. Officer Martinez nodded slowly. Ms. Reed, I apologize. It's clear you didn't take the bracelet. Because there was no bracelet to take, Valencia said quietly. Officer Martinez looked at her. You think she's lying? I think she either lost it before boarding or never had it to begin with, Valencia said. And I think she accused me because she needed someone to blame. Officer Chen frowned. That's a serious allegation. So is accusing someone of theft with no evidence, Marcus said. Gerald cleared his throat. We should probably speak with Mrs. Whitmore. They brought Mrs. Whitmore to the security office. She entered with her chin up, her expression indignant. Have you arrested her yet? She asked, gesturing toward Valencia. Officer Martinez remained standing. Mrs. Whitmore, we reviewed the security footage. And it shows that there was no bracelet on your tray table at any point during the flight. Mrs. Whitmore's face went pale. That's not possible. It also shows, Officer Martinez continued, that you boarded the aircraft without wearing a bracelet. Mrs. Whitmore started, then stopped. The camera angle must be wrong. We reviewed multiple angles, Gerald said. The flight attendant never went near your seat except to serve you water. And you weren't wearing a bracelet when you boarded. Mrs. Whitmore's hands were shaking now. I must have taken it off before boarding, she said quickly. I put it in my purse. And then someone went through my purse while I was in the restroom. Officer Chen raised an eyebrow. Did you file a report about someone going through your purse? No, because I thought she took it from my tray table, Mrs. Whitmore said, pointing at Valencia. But now you're saying it was in your purse. Officer Martinez asked. Yes, it must have been. May we see your purse? Gerald asked. Mrs. Whitmore clutched a bag to her chest. No, you don't have the right. We're trying to help you find your bracelet, Officer Martinez said gently. If it's in your purse, we can locate it. Mrs. Whitmore's face was bright red now. I don't consent to a search, she said. Marcus spoke up. Interesting. Ms. Reed didn't consent to a search either, but you demanded one anyway. Mrs. Whitmore glared at him. That's different. How? Marcus asked. She didn't answer. Officer Martinez stepped forward. Mrs. Whitmore, I need to ask you directly. Did you have the bracelet with you when you boarded the plane? Mrs. Whitmore's mouth opened and closed. I thought I did. That's not an answer, Officer Chen said. Mrs. Whitmore looked around the room, at the officers, at Gerald, at Marcus, at Valencia, and then her shoulders sagged. I don't know, she whispered. You don't know? Officer Martinez repeated. I've been so stressed lately, Mrs. Whitmore said, her voice breaking. I thought I put it on this morning. I always wear it, but I don't. I don't actually remember seeing it today. Gerald leaned forward. Mrs. Whitmore, did you accuse Ms. Reed of theft without being certain the bracelet was ever on the plane? Mrs. Whitmore didn't answer, but her silence said everything. Officer Martinez's expression hardened. Mrs. Whitmore, you made a very serious accusation. You caused significant distress to Ms. Reed and disrupted an entire flight based on an assumption. Do you understand the gravity of that? Mrs. Whitmore's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. I panicked. I didn't mean to. You accuse me of being a thief, Valencia said quietly, in front of an entire cabin. You demanded I be searched. You wanted me detained, all because you assumed, based on nothing but the color of my skin, that I must have taken something. Mrs. Whitmore's face crumpled. That's exactly what happened, Valencia said, and you need to own that. The room was silent. Finally, Officer Martinez said, Mrs. Whitmore, you're free to go, but I'm going to strongly suggest that you think very carefully about making accusations in the future without evidence. Mrs. Whitmore stood shakily and left the room without another word. After she was gone, Officer Martinez turned to Valencia. Ms. Reed, on behalf of airport security, I apologize. You were treated unfairly, and I'm sorry for that. Thank you, Valencia said. Gerald stepped forward. Ms. Reed, Delta will also be issuing a formal apology, and we'll be documenting this incident in Mrs. Whitmore's passenger file. What does that mean? Marcus asked. It means if she makes another false accusation, there will be consequences, Gerald said. We don't tolerate passengers who harass our crew. Valencia nodded, but she felt hollow, because an apology didn't undo what had happened. It didn't erase the humiliation. It didn't erase the fact that she'd been presumed guilty. It didn't change the fact that if there hadn't been footage, if she hadn't insisted on it, she might have been searched, detained, possibly even arrested, all because a woman couldn't accept that she'd lost her own bracelet. Is there anything else you need from me? Valencia asked. No, Officer Martinez said. You're free to go. Valencia stood. Marcus stood with her. Valencia, Gerald said, I mean this. Thank you for handling this with such professionalism. A lot of people would have lost their temper. You didn't. Valencia looked at him. I didn't have the luxury of losing my temper. Gerald's expression shifted. Understanding, maybe, or shame. Valencia walked out of the security office and into the terminal. Marcus walked beside her. You okay? He asked. No, Valencia said. But I will be. That night, in her apartment in Atlanta, Valencia sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea and her laptop. She opened a blank document and began typing. Not a complaint, not a lawsuit, a proposal. T.O., Delta Airlines corporate office. From Valencia Reed, flight attendant. Mandatory bias training and passenger accountability. Day leadership. Today, I was falsely accused of theft by a passenger. Despite there being no evidence, I was asked to submit to a search, questioned by security, and treated as a suspect. The only reason I was exonerated is because I insisted on reviewing security footage. But here's what troubles me. What happens to crew members who don't know to ask for footage? What happens when there's no footage? What happens to the flight attendant who don't have the training I have, who don't know their rights, who are too scared to push back? This incident revealed gaps in our system, gaps that put crew members at risk and allow passengers to weaponize accusations without consequence. I propose the following. 1. Mandatory implicit bias training for all crew members and passengers via pre-flight videos. 2. A clear protocol for handling theft accusations that protects crew members from being presumed guilty. 3. Consequences for passengers who make false accusations, including potential flight bans. 4. A crew advocate position. Someone crew members can contact immediately when they are facing harassment or false allegations. I am happy to help develop these programs. I have a background in fraud investigation and 8 years of experience identifying false claims. This isn't about revenge. It's about making sure no one else has to go through what I went through today. Respectfully, Valencia Reed. She read it over twice, then hit send. She didn't know if anyone would listen, but she had to try, because staying silent didn't protect people. Speaking up did. 3 days later, Valencia received an email. Ms. Reed, thank you for your proposal. We would like to meet with you to discuss implementation. Are you available next Tuesday at 10 a.m. at our corporate office? Regards, Janine Holloway, VP of Employee Relations. Valencia stated the email. Then she called Marcus. They want to meet, she said, about your proposal. Yeah. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Valencia, this is big. I know. You could actually change policy. Maybe, Valencia said. Or maybe they'll thank me for my input and do nothing. Only one way to find out, Marcus said. The meeting was held in a glass-walled conference room on the 14th floor of Delta's headquarters. Present were Asterisk Janine Holloway, VP of Employee Relations, Asterisk Michael Torres, Chief Operating Officer, Asterisk Dr. Sarah Chen, Director of Diversity and Inclusion, Asterisk and Captain Sandra Mills, a senior pilot and member of the Diversity Task Force. Valencia wore her uniform. She wanted them to see her not as a victim, but as a professional. Janine opened the meeting. Ms. Reed, thank you for bringing this to our attention. We reviewed the security footage and the incident report. What happened to you was unacceptable. Thank you, Valencia said. Michael leaned forward. We've read your proposal. It's thorough, thoughtful, and frankly, overdue. We'd like to move forward with all 4 recommendations. Valencia blinked. All 4. Yes, Dr. Chen said. Implicit bias training is something we've been discussing for months, but we needed a catalyst. Your proposal gave us that. Captain Mills spoke up. I've been flying for 23 years, and I've seen crew members harassed, accused, and demeaned by passengers who face no consequences. It's time that change. Valencia felt her throat tighten. So you're actually going to implement this? We are, Janine said, and we'd like you to be part of the implementation team. You'd work with Dr. Chen to develop the training modules, and with our legal team to draft the passenger accountability policy. I'm still a flight attendant, Valencia said. I can't. We'd like to offer you a dual role, Janine interrupted. You'd continue flying, but you'd also serve as consultant for crew safety and passenger relations. Paid position, of course. Valencia sat back. This was real. They were serious. I'll do it, she said. Janine smiled. Good. Welcome to the team. Over the next 6 months, Valencia worked with Dr. Chen and a team of psychologists, HR specialists, and legal experts to develop the new policies. The implicit bias training became mandatory for all crew members, with annual refreshers. The passenger accountability policy was implemented, creating a clear process for handling false accusations and establishing consequences for passengers who weaponized complaints. And the crew advocate position was created, a 24/7 hotline that crew members could call when facing harassment or false allegations. But the biggest change came when Delta decided to include a pre-flight video about treating crew with respect. The video featured real crew members, including Valencia, talking about their experiences. Valencia's segment was simple. I'm Valencia. I've been a flight attendant for 14 years. I love my job. But I've also been accused, dismissed, and disrespected. Not because I did anything wrong, but because of assumptions people made about me. If you see a crew member, don't assume. Ask. Listen. Treat us the way you'd want to be treated. We're here for your safety, and we deserve your respect. The video went viral. News outlets picked it up. Other airlines started developing similar programs. And Valencia received hundreds of messages from crew members, flight attendants, gate agents, pilots, thanking her. One message stood out. It was from a young black flight attendant named Kira. Ms. Reed, I just wanted to say thank you. Last week, a passenger accused me of being rude when I asked him to turn off his phone. He demanded I be written up. But because of your policy, my supervisor had my back. She reviewed the footage, saw that I was professional, and filed a complaint against the passenger instead. I didn't have to fight alone. Because of you, the system fought for me. Thank you. Valencia read the message 3 times, tears streaming down her face. That's why she'd done this. Not for recognition. Not for revenge. But so that the next person wouldn't have to carry the weight alone. A year after the incident, Valencia received a call from Mrs. Whitmore. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello. Ms. Reed. The voice was hesitant, shaky. This is Patricia Whitmore. I don't know if you remember me. I remember, Valencia said quietly. There was a long silence. I'm calling to apologize, Mrs. Whitmore said. I know I apologized before, but I don't think I really understood what I'd done. I've been in therapy for the past year, working on a lot of things, and I wanted you to know that I see it now. I see how my assumptions, my biases, my panic, I see how all of that hurt you, and I'm sorry. Valencia didn't know what to say. I also wanted you to know, Mrs. Whitmore continued, that I found the bracelet. It was in my jewelry box at home. I'd taken it off before my trip and forgotten, and instead of accepting that I'd made a mistake, I blamed you. That was wrong. And I'm so sorry. Valencia took a slow breath. Mrs. Whitmore, I appreciate your apology, and I'm glad you found your bracelet. But I need you to understand something. What you did to me, that wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice. You chose to accuse me. You chose to demand I be searched. You chose to believe the worst about me based on nothing but your own bias. And that choice had consequences. I know, Mrs. Whitmore whispered, and I'm trying to do better. Good, Valencia said, because that's all any of us can do. Recognize when we've caused harm and try to do better. They sat in silence for a moment. Thank you for taking my call, Mrs. Whitmore said. You're welcome, Valencia said, and she meant it, because forgiveness wasn't about letting someone off the hook. It was about releasing the weight you carried, and Valencia had carried enough. 2 years after the incident, Valencia stood in front of a room full of new Delta flight attendants. She was there as part of their training, a guest speaker on crew safety and passenger relations. She wore her uniform, her name tag gleaming. Good morning, she began. My name is Valencia Reed. I've been a flight attendant for 16 years, and I want to tell you a story. She told them about the accusation, the footage, the fight for accountability, and the changes that came after. When she finished, a young woman in the front row raised her hand. Ms. Reed, How did you stay so calm? I don't think I could have. Valencia smiled. Honestly, I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to quit. But I also knew that if I lost control, I'd lose credibility. So I stayed calm. Not because I'm naturally calm. I'm not. But because I knew that my response mattered. And I chose dignity over anger. Another hand went up. Do you regret not fighting harder in the moment? No, Valencia said. Because fighting harder wouldn't have changed her mind. Evidence did. And that's a lesson I want you to take from this. You don't owe anyone your anger. You don't owe anyone an emotional response. What you owe yourself is a truth. And sometimes the truth takes time to reveal itself. But it always does. The room was silent. You're going to face passengers who doubt you, Valencia continued. You're going to face situations where you're presumed guilty. You're going to be tired, frustrated, and hurt. But I want you to remember this. Your worth is not determined by someone else's assumptions. Your value is not up for debate. You know who you are, and that's enough. Applause filled the room. After the session, several attendees approached her, some with questions, some just to say thank you. One young man, barely 22, shook her hand and said, "You're the reason I applied to Delta. I saw your video, and I thought, if she can do this job with that much dignity, so can I." Valencia felt her eyes sting with tears. "You can," she said, "and you will." That night, Valencia sat on her couch with a glass of wine and her phone. She scrolled through messages, crew members sharing their stories, thanking her, telling her the policy had helped them. She thought about Mrs. Whitmore's apology. She thought about the young man who'd been inspired by her story. She thought about Kira, who hadn't had to fight alone. And she thought about herself, 2 years ago, standing in that galley, holding a stranger's trash, being accused of something she didn't do. She'd been scared. She'd been hurt. But she'd also been strong. Not because she'd fought back, but because she'd stood still. Because she'd waited for the truth. Because she believed, even when it was hard, that justice would come. And it had. Not loud, not flashy, but real, quiet, lasting. Valencia set down her phone and picked up a notebook. She opened to a blank page and wrote, "Lessons I've learned. 1. Your dignity is yours. No one can take it unless you give it away. 2. The truth doesn't need volume. It just needs time. 3. Fighting back doesn't always mean raising your voice. Sometimes it means standing still and letting the facts speak. 4. People will assume. Let them. Your job is to know who you are. 5. Change doesn't happen because you're loud. It happens because you're consistent." She closed the notebook and looked out the window at the Atlanta skyline. Somewhere out there, a flight attendant was being doubted. Somewhere, a crew member was being dismissed. Somewhere, someone was facing the same fight she'd faced. But now, because of her, they wouldn't fight alone. The system would fight with them. The policy would protect them. The footage would defend them. And that, more than any apology, more than any recognition, was justice. There are moments when the world asks you to prove yourself. Moments when assumptions become accusations. Moments when staying calm feels impossible. But Valencia Reed learned something that day, something every woman who's ever been doubted already knows. Your worth is not up for debate. Your truth doesn't need permission. And your dignity is not a performance. It's a choice. A quiet, powerful, unshakable choice. To stand still when the world wants you to crumble. To wait for the truth when everyone else has already decided. To know, deep in your bones, that you don't owe anyone your anger. You owe yourself your peace. And Valencia chose peace. Not because it was easy, but because she knew something that her accuser didn't. The truth always comes out. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it takes footage. Sometimes it takes a policy change and a year of work. But it comes. And when it does, it doesn't shout. It just stands there, quiet and undeniable, proving what you knew all along, that you were exactly who you said you were. Nothing more, nothing less, just enough